If you want to be a highly effective CEO, then a big part of your longevity and success is going to come down to the habits and the behaviors that you take every single day. Over the last decade, I've helped CEOs in 16 countries to become more effective in their role. And in this video, I'm going to break down for you 11 of the habits that they've integrated to help them get to a point where they can maximize their time, lead with confidence, and ultimately grow a business without losing their sanity. If you're new here though, my name is Byron Morrison. I'm the author of The Effective CEO, and I evolve first-time CEOs into the leader their business needs to get to the next level of success. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Now, just to give you some context before we dive in, with these 11 habits, these aren't going to be in any particular order. And with some of them, you're going to be able to take these insights and start applying them straight away. But with others, like tip number 4, it's going to take some time to test and refine it to figure out how it works for you. Now, let's dive into habit number 1. The first thing we need to talk about is effective planning. This sounds really obvious, but you'd be amazed how many CEOs I speak to who, beyond just having a rough idea of what they need to do for the day, don't take the time to properly plan what they need to get done. And this is a huge issue because if you don't have a target to aim for, you're gonna miss. And that's why I found with the CEOs I work with, one of the non-negotiables we have to put in place is that every 90 days, they take half a day to get out the business, to step away and really focus and figure out where are they going, what do they want to achieve, what are the next 90 days KPIs. Because by figuring out at a top level what they need to do with the business, they can then take that, feed it back to the team, set the right expectations, and really communicate what needs to get done. This in itself also makes it easier to approach the week. And one of my favorite questions to ask is to look ahead to 5 p.m. Friday afternoon and really ask yourself, what would I have need to got done this week for this week to be a success? You can take that future pace and really then align it with your priorities to know exactly what you need to get done. The reason why I really like this approach is how many weeks do you have where, despite being busy, you don't actually know what you got done? Well, by taking the time to step back and think about, okay, where do I want to be at the end of this week? You can then take that clarity and use it to really plan accordingly. You can then repeat this as you go into the day as well. You can look ahead and think to yourself, what do I need to get done by 5 o'clock today or whatever time you want to finish for today to be a success? You can take that, look at the structure of the rest of your days, and then really schedule everything else you need to get done. So that's habit number 1, taking the time to properly plan, not just for the day, but on a macro level where you want to be in 90 days and use that to really align your focus going forward. Habit number 2 is developing a morning routine that prepares them for the day ahead. Because what most people do when they first wake up is immediately grab their phone because they want to catch up on everything they missed overnight. When you're a CEO though, this is a huge trap to fall into because the reality is there's never anything good there. Just think about it. When you go on your emails and messages, it's just people wanting your attention, informing you of problems, all these things going wrong that you need to deal with. And if you start your day immediately diving into that, all it does is push you into this high stress state where mentally you're always just thinking about problem solving and things that need to get done. Not only are you then going to take that anxious energy into everything else that you do, it also takes your focus away from the other things that you need to prioritize. And that's why if you want to be an effective CEO, you'd be far better off defending that time and putting boundaries in place where you don't check your phone first thing in the morning. Instead, take the time to ease into the day, prepare yourself, properly plan, get your high value work done, and only then dive into the firefighting and other problems. Doing that's going to make you far more effective with your time, and you're also going to be a lot more calm and grounded with everything else that's thrown your way. Habit number 3 is running effective meetings that actually maximize their time and drive the business forward. Because what I find is that most overwhelmed CEOs have days where they have endless meetings where they're just bouncing around between them, not really being prepared or knowing what's going on, and just reacting to it and dealing with it in the moment. This is a huge issue because it means that there's a lot of unfocused time. There's mistakes that can be made and things that can be overlooked. And that's why highly effective CEOs actually take the time to prepare for what needs to get done. Whether you set aside a few minutes in the morning or before the meeting, really slow down and think about, what do I want to get out of this? What is the outcome we're looking for here? what do we need to do going forward? What questions do I need to ask? And who's in the room that I really need to communicate to and bring the best out of? By taking the time to slow down and think about it, you can have a clear plan going in, and you can then communicate that to everyone else. You can set the direction, and then if at any point it starts going off on a tangent or people are talking about other stuff, you can hone it back in and be like, do you know what, that's a great point, but let's table that and have another conversation about that. This way you can keep it focused and make sure that the topic at hand is actually being dealt with. The second part with running effective meetings is actually defending your time. I've lost count of how many clients I've worked with where their meetings tend to overrun. They then late for the next one and the next, and their days completely get away from them. They also don't have any time between them to really stop, think, get a drink, or just take a moment to breathe. Now, one solution to that is to put buffers in between meetings, but I found that in itself, if you're putting 10, 15-minute buffers in place, can add an extra hour, 90 minutes to your day, which, let's be honest, you just don't have the time for. And that's why a far better approach is to actually set expectations and boundaries over time, because if you give someone an hour, they're going to talk for an hour. If you give them 45 minutes, they'll fit within that mold. And that's why if you want to be an effective CEO, a habit to get into is to set that expectation up front. Let's say you have a meeting from 1 until 2 and another one 2 until 3. We'll go into the first one and communicate and say, look, I have a hard stop at 1:50. That way you can then hone the focus in and make sure people are on point. But to take it a step further, you then implement what I call the 25% rule. Essentially, you look at how long the meeting is, and you towards the last 25% of it, you start transitioning towards wrapping up. The reason why this is so effective is most people near the end of meetings say they've got a meeting from 1 until 2. It's 2 minutes before, and then they start to panic and they're like, what do we still need to do? What do we need to cover? And it just gets overwhelming. Whereas if you look at it and it's okay, we've got 15 minutes left, say that to everyone. Be like, look, we have 15 minutes remaining. What else do you need from me? What are our next steps? What are the actions we need to take? Where do we go from here? So you give yourself enough time to transition to creating a clear plan and where to go from there. You can then set the right expectations. You can put accountability in place. You can make sure people are feeding back everything that needs to get done. And you're just going to be far more focused and in control. Habit number 4 is they build their days around their energy and sustainability rather than treating every day the same way. I'm about to share with you one of my favorite energy management strategies, but first I want to give you a real world example so that you can see this in action. So I had a CEO come to me who was absolutely crushing Monday and Tuesday. He was waking up early, he was focused, he was energized for the day ahead. By Wednesday, though, he was kind of off his game a bit. His energy was down, he was getting less done. Thursday was even worse, and Friday was a complete disaster. He was unfocused, just drained, and trying to finish out the week. So really, in reality, he was having 2 productive days a week. What I found when I broke it down is he was pushing so hard on Monday and Tuesday that it was just depleting him for the rest of the week. And that was why what I got him to do was implement what I call push and pull days. Push days are days where you go all out. You take on higher bandwidth work, you work more hours, you take on a bigger workload. Pull days are when you pull back. You focus on recovery, you have lower bandwidth tasks, you have less on your plate, and you really allow yourself to re-energize and get back in the zone. So for this client, the way that I suggested they would do it is he would have Monday and Tuesday as a push day, and then Wednesday he'd pull back. He'd sleep in, he'd have less meetings, he'd finish early, go play tennis, golf, get a massage, like whatever he wanted to do, just so he could re-energize and get himself ready to come back in Thursday and Friday. And when I first suggested this to him, he really pushed back on it. He was like, there's no way I could do it. I've got so much work on. I need to be getting all of this stuff done. And I said to him, just test it and see what happened. Well, he found that by taking Wednesday as a pull day, he was able to re-energize to the point they could come back in Thursday and Friday with the same level of energy that he had Monday and Tuesday. So he essentially went from having 2 productive days a week to 4. And this is why it's so important to look at the bigger picture and your energy and sustainability throughout the week, because most CEOs, especially first-time ones, are just trying to go, go, go. It's all about getting stuff done. And it comes at the detriment of burning themselves out. And this is why I love the push and pull day philosophy, because it really allows you to look at the bigger picture and make decisions where you take that pressure off yourself. You go in and say, do you know what, today's a pull day, and you can be at peace with that without feeling guilty or beating yourself up. Now, with push and pull days, these are one of the things that you're going to have to test. Everyone is different with different routines and commitments and energy levels. And that's why you're really going to have to figure out what works best for you. Because if I use myself as an example, I do a lot of content creation, but I find that Mondays are actually my least creative and energized days of the week. We do a lot of stuff on weekends, and I just come into the day just not feeling at my best. And that's why if I try to force it, things take longer and I just don't get them done. That's why I have Monday as a pull day, and I instead treat Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as push days where I come in, I have to do my energy, high bandwidth tasks, and that's what works for me. And that's why I'm saying you need to just look at your routine, the way things are structured, and figure out how could you do this. But like I said, one of my favorite parts of this is it just takes that mental pressure off yourself where you feel like you need to be full steam ahead every single day. Habit number 5 is all about how they structure their days, particularly when it comes to high growth, high value work. So I'll give you an example of this and then I'll talk you through the solution. I had a first-time CEO reach out to me when they were in the middle of their next fundraising round. And for him, he needed to be spending a lot of his time like reaching out to investors, having conversations, writing presentations and doing pitches. But the problem was he had so many other things going on, he just wasn't getting round to it. And when I started looking at what he was doing, he was approaching his days using the usual productivity advice where he created a to-do list, he'd figure out the things he needed to get done, and then he'd dive in. And practices like this sound great on paper, but they're actually catastrophic if you want to be a highly effective CEO, because the issue with them is they're generally focused around short-term problems or things that seem important in the moment without factoring in your long-term priorities. And also for this client, what it meant is when he got all of his daily tasks done, by the end, maybe later on, he'd get an hour to focus on fundraising or all of the other tasks he needed to get done. And this was a huge issue because he meant that energy and bandwidth-wise, he was depleted. He didn't have the headspace to be creative. And also he wasn't executing on these tasks properly, which in reality, if he didn't secure this round, there wasn't going to be a business to do all the firefighting in anyway. And that was why we really needed to restructure his days in a way that they were built around his high-value work. So what we did is we figured out how much time does he need each week to execute on these tasks. For him, it worked out to needing around 3 hours every single day. We then rebuilt his calendar from the ground up where this work was prioritized to be scheduled first. What that looked like in execution for him was 9 until 12 every day was blocked off and defended just for him to focus on fundraising tasks. And for you, that might be other high value work or growth that you need to execute on. He then communicated to the team that he would not be available between 9 and 12. He didn't check his email. He didn't go on Slack or go to any of his messages. Why? Well, going back to what I said to you earlier in this video, all that did was show problems that needed his attention, meaning he couldn't show up properly for his high-value work, and instead he was focused and stressed on everything else. So he'd go into his day, he would do 3 hours on these fundraising tasks, then he'd take a break, he'd get some lunch, and he would only then transition into his to-do list and everything else that needed to get done. By doing this, he could prioritize his high-value work and build his routine around the things that are actually going to drive growth. Yes, he would have some communication with the team that if the building was on fire and there was an immediate thing that needed his attention, yes, he could change things up. But if that was once a week, then fine. He would still have 4 other days where he could drive growth instead of hopefully just getting an hour a day and not actually getting it done properly. So for you, take some time to think about what is your zone of genius? Where does your time have the greatest impact? What are the things that are actually going to drive growth? And then think about when are you most energized and likely to perform there at your best. Build your calendar around that and set the right boundaries to defend your time. And you'll find you can get out of that cycle of just being busy, but not actually getting much done. Habit number 6 is being clear on what to prioritize and delegating accordingly. Because when you're a founder or manager, you have to be involved in everything. Chances are you need to in order to grow. But what a lot of first-time CEOs don't realize is that as you scale, your focus has to become far more honed in. And the problem is when you stretch yourself too thin or you get involved in everything, it takes you away from what you actually need to get done. And this is why so many first-time CEOs become burnt out or stretched thin to the point that they're working so much in the business, they're not actually working on it and driving growth. And this is why it's so important to recognize that what you don't do is just as important as what you do. And everything you take on and commit to has a price. It's always going to have a cost where it takes you away from something else. And this is why if you look at really effective CEOs, they know their zone of genius. They know the things that they need to get done to drive growth and where their time has the greatest impact. And then when new tasks come their way, instead of just diving in and getting it done or thinking about what do I need to do for this, their immediate thought is, do I need to do this or could it be done by someone else? If it could be done by someone else, who can I delegate it to and how can I get it off my plate? Taking those few moments could save you hours every single week. And this is why if you want to become more effective with your time, you need to be really defensive with what you take on. Another action that I always get my clients to do is to audit their time. When you're going into the week, rather than just having this endless meetings and tasks, take some time to really slow down and think about, is this actually important? As in, does this get us closer to our 90-day goals and where we want to get to? If the answer is yes, then does this need to be done by you? If the answer is no, who else could do it? You taking a few minutes before you go into the day or week to really audit what you're taking on and then delegating it could save you hours every single week. But it means you just need to slow down and be intentional with what you take on. So in summary, always think about who can you delegate to and what can you get off your plate, because doing so is going to free you up to focus on what the business actually needs from you. Just adding this in here while I'm editing this video, if you want to dive into this further, I do have a free training called the CEO Time Audit Process where I'm going to show you how to audit your time, figure out where you're spending your days and what you need to get off your plate to become more effective in your role. You can access that for free using the link in the description of this video. Habit number 7 is going to be one of the most important for your long-term growth, clarity, and focus on what needs to get done. And that is scheduling time just to slow down and think. The problem for a lot of CEOs is they have so much on their plate and so many things going on that every single day is just stuck in the trenches trying to get things done. The problem with this, though, is when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to think clearly, to see the full picture. And this is often where mistakes get made, opportunities get overlooked, or actions aren't really in alignment with what needs to get done. And this is why if you look at highly effective CEOs, they schedule time just to step back and look at the bigger picture, to slow down, to process problems, to not just react to what's in front of them. Because what you need to understand is there's a really big difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is impulsive, it's driven by emotion, whereas a response is processed and controlled. And the reality is there's no way you can make the right decisions or show up at your best when you're always in that reactive state. And this is why I know it's tough, but you need to make the time to step back, to slow down, to process problems and really think about what's happening. Because it's when you step away, that's when you get the best ideas. It's where you start to think clearly, where you can process decisions and really get clarity on where you go going forward. And that's why I really advise to build out some time in your diary every single week. Go for a walk, get a workout in, go to a coffee shop and change your environment. Whatever you need to do, allow yourself time just to step back, look at problems, process them, and by doing so, you're going to have so much more clarity and feel far more in control of what needs to get done. Habit number 8 is highly effective CEOs face problems head on. You'd be amazed at how many first-time CEOs I speak to who avoid challenges like difficult conversations for weeks, sometimes months at a time. And I get it, they're uncomfortable, they're not something that anyone likes to do, but they're also part of the role. And the issue is when you avoid facing these conversations or dealing with these situations, not only do you allow problems to manifest, you're also doing the team a disservice, you're facing getting clarity on what's happening, and you allow all of these problems to continue. And this is why the coaching and guidance I always give to people is what you need to recognize with, say, tough conversations is it's not the conversation you're worried about, it's the other person's reaction. You're building up in your mind that it's going to be this huge catastrophe and this big argument or ordeal, and that's why you're talking yourself out of it. And that's why I always encourage people, instead of viewing them as a difficult conversation, reframe it in your mind. View it as a clarity conversation where you're going to go to get information to figure out what's happening and how you can best move forward. That in itself takes a lot of the pressure away because you can go in and be like, you know what, this is not going to be an argument. This is going to be me dealing with an issue, giving feedback, helping this person improve, realigning their focus, and then setting what we do from there. At the end of the day, though, just putting these off is never going to lead to growth. And that's why the more you do them, the easier it becomes. But you've got to pull the band-aid off and face them head on. This is why I always say to clients that when there's a difficult conversation or a situation that you need to deal with, either deal with it as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean being reactive and just dive in. Take the time to plan, figure out what you want to communicate and actually how you're going to deal with it, or schedule it for as soon as possible. What that does is it means it's holding yourself accountable where you're not just putting it off and making excuses to yourself to justify why it's not the right time now. Habit number 9 is having dedicated time each day structured into their diary to get on top of other tasks and issues that need their attention. I find with a lot of the CEOs I work with, their days tend to get away from them. And then by the end of it, they find they haven't caught up on email. They've got all these messages building up. And instead of being able to go home and relax, they then have to work late into the evening to try and catch up. And it's really frustrating because you want to have balance. You want to switch off. You want to be there present with your family. But in the back of your mind, all you can think about is all the stuff that you still need to get done. And that's why I found that the simple solution to this is to have dedicated time set aside at the end of your day to get on top of all of these issues. This may be 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes. You need to figure out what that looks like for you, but you need to be really intentional with this time. And again, future pace it. Ask yourself, what do I need to get done here or move forward for me to go home and switch off for the evening? For a lot of the time, this is going to be catching up on your email, finishing off any last minute tasks, planning your next day. Really defend this time accordingly and use it to wrap out and finish out the day. And that way you can then go home and unwind. I do find at first that this is one of the tasks that people tend to struggle sticking to. They don't have the right boundaries in place, or they allow their days just to be overloaded. So it gets to the end and they say to themselves, I don't have time to do this right now. What I find though is that the highly effective CEOs who defend this time by looking at what else they take on, when they say yes, when they push back and say no, and viewing this as like the same light as a meeting with one of their most important clients where they're going to make sure that it gets done, means they can follow through and allows them to feel far more in control. Habit number 10 is they take time every single day to slow down and reflect on what happened. When you're running a business, it's easy to get stuck in a cycle where you have so many things on, all of these competing priorities that you're just trying your best to get through the day. The issue with that, though, is if you don't take time to slow down and think about what's happened, you're going to overlook all of these opportunities, you're going to repeat mistakes, and you're really not going to grow and get better. And this is why with all of my clients, what I get them to do is to take some time at the end of each day to really reflect on what happened, to think about what challenges came up, how did they handle them, what do they need to learn and improve for the future. The way I always frame it to them is it's a lot like an elite athlete going back and watching old game footage. In doing so, that's how they develop an edge and figure out how to improve for the future. And it's exactly the same for you. You've got to slow down and think about, how did I handle that tough conversation? Where did my time get away from me? What should I have done in setting that boundary or communicating or keeping someone accountable? Really take time to think about, what did you do? What could you have done better? How do you then need to improve for the next time? This is how you're going to build your confidence. It's how you're going to build your intuition, and you're going to be far more effective in your role. I know it's not the most glamorous of tasks, but this is where the real growth comes in. So set aside some time each day, whether you want to journal, just think about it, like whatever whatever that looks like for you. But take time to take stock of the day. Think about what you did, how you navigated it, what you could learn, and how to improve in the future. And that's how you're going to become a more effective CEO. And that takes us to habit number 11, which is highly effective CEOs are always looking to better themselves and improve. Because the reality is what got you to where you are today and your current habits and behaviors and way of doing things isn't going to get you to where you want to be tomorrow. And if anything, they're the very reason why you're stuck. One of my favorite quotes is your business growth will never outgrow your inner growth. And this is why it's so important to recognize that every new level of success is going to require a new level of you. And this is why highly effective CEOs always allocate time to keep continuing and improving themselves, whether that's reading books, doing courses, getting coached or mentored. They're surrounding themselves with people who help them figure out their blind spots and push them to become better. Whereas overwhelmed CEOs tend to just be stuck in the trenches. They're so focused on everything that needs to get done that there's always a reason or a way to justify why they don't have time for this right now. And this is why you've got to hold yourself to the standard to figure out, okay, what skills do I need to develop? Where am I lagging behind? And you need to treat it with the mentality of this is how you're going to get to the next level, and it's how you're going to develop that edge. So it's really taking time for personal development because that's how you're going to grow and evolve. And this goes back to habit number 10, because by taking the time to reflect and see how you're navigating different situations, that in itself is going to show you where you may be falling behind. Maybe it's down to communication. Maybe it's how you deal and manage your team. By starting to figure out where your lag indicators are, then you can put your focus on, okay, these are the areas I need to develop, and that's how I'm going to improve. So there you have it, 11 habits that you can develop that are going to make you a more effective CEO. Let me know down in the comments below, what were your biggest takeaways and which of these you're going to start working on today to help you become more effective in your role. If you want to dive into any of this further, there's also links to my books, The Effective CEO and CEO in Control, in the description of this video. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss more videos on mindset, leadership, and becoming more effective in your role. I've been Byron Morrison. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.